really unprecedented times due to COVID-19. We're all focused on preventing the spread of the virus and staying physically healthy. And that's meant keeping the family at home for long stretches of time. So the adults are working online in many cases, and kids are doing schoolwork online. No doubt everyone has seen a big increase in their screen time. So we all agree that the internet is such a valuable tool for staying connected with friends and family and for making remote learning possible. But it also can be a dangerous place for unsuspecting children who are innocent targets for online predators. I'm the father myself of 4 kids. My kids are good kids, and my wife and I trust them, but we also worry about their safety. And frankly, this has been a time when criminals see a target-rich environment. Local news reports are all too frequently tell us the extent and sophistication of predator activity, and Utah families are not immune to these crimes. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a nonprofit group that's dedicated to reducing child exploitation and also to prevent child victimization. Reports to them of child exploitation more than quadrupled in April of this year compared to a year ago. So we've seen a huge uptick as people are home and online so much more. We are fortunate to have dedicated law enforcement officers who are constantly on guard, who are surveying the internet, posing as young children, as young would-be victims, and arresting and shutting down illegal activity when they can. Parents also have a critical role to play. We know our kids best, and we have the proximity to their tech devices, and we can talk together as a family about internet safety and listen to their experiences. So we are hosting this webinar today to provide some strategies and tips for you to protect your children and to help them experience the benefits of the internet and avoid the risks, including cyberbullying and being sent harmful material. So even before the coronavirus public health crisis, I made child online safety a priority in Congress. I've introduced a measure calling on the tech industry and app developers to create an independent app ratings board that's similar to what the movie and video game industries have done to develop their user-friendly parent controls for apps. And I know that Representative Pulsifer, who's on the webinar with us today, has also led a similar effort at the state level, and we want to commend her efforts. I've also supported the Department of Justice resources for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and offered an amendment to boost federal funding for children's justice centers to provide comprehensive services and support for child abuse victims. I am really grateful that some of the experts in online safety are here with me today, and I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then they'll each give a short presentation with information and safety tips, and then we'll open it up to you for questions. So first, as I mentioned earlier, Representative Susan Pulsifer. She represents House District 50 in the Utah Legislature. She serves on a House Education Committee and has degrees in education from Brigham Young University. In the last session of the legislature, she introduced and passed a resolution, as I said, similar to my federal measure, calling for the establishment of a ratings board for apps on phones, tablets, and other internet-ready devices to provide parents with transparency and parental controls. And then next we have Michelle Bush-Upwell, who is an education specialist in the Utah Attorney General's office and a member of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. She teaches online safety to parents, to community groups, and to churches. And she has said that social media is the #1 way predators are getting to our kids. So if the youth are not taught how to safely use social media, they could unintentionally be handing predators the exact information that they're looking to get. Next, we'll have Ben Horsley, who's the Granite School District's Communication and Outreach Director. Before that, he was the Deputy Director for Congressman Rob Bishop. He and his wife are the parents of 5 children, and he has led several educational seminars for parents and educators on how to help students to be safe when using social media. So Representative Pulsifer, we'd love to hear from you on your efforts to advance online safety. But why don't you take us from there?
Thank you, Congressman. As you mentioned, I have been working in this arena and trying to find ways to help parents make the internet safer for their children. My interest in this started several years ago before I was in the House of Representatives when I was on Jordan School Board. And on the school board, we were able to create a lot of high quality filtering for the devices that the children would use at school. And that worked very well until every child came to school with a phone, had their own data. And then we needed to do some other things that would filter what they had with them on their phone, not only at home, but at school, at a friend's house, other places. So I ran a joint resolution this year. It was HJR 9, and it looked at asking the industry to create filtering systems and rating systems for apps. So as we know, the movie industry, whenever your child comes home and says, Mom, I want to go see this movie or that movie, then you say, well, what's it rated? Because that's a tool for parents. Parents have a fairly good idea of what that means. And so depending on what their own values are, they say, yes, you can go, or no, you can't. I have 4 daughters, and I have actually 20 grandchildren. And I have had many conversations with my daughters that have expressed frustration that the apps that they download and that their kids have on their phones, they have no idea really exactly what those apps can do. And when they find out, they're very concerned. And sometimes even though they have filtering systems in their home, the child with that app can go outside of the home and access inappropriate material. So this bill we asked the app stores to create a rating system, just like the movie industry has created rating systems for movies. So this would be asking the app stores to create a rating system. And we love that it was done as a private thing. This isn't government imposing this on them. This is them doing it themselves. And this would help every app to have a rating system that is, number 1, easy to find, and number 2, everybody understands it, and number 3, standardized across the industry. And that would give parents transparency. It would give parents the information they need to make the decisions for their children. Because, I really believe that parents are responsible for their children, and they should make the choices for what their children see. This gives parents a tool to do their job and to do the things that make those decisions for their children, just like they do. And in fact, video games, that industry is also created a rating system that parents can use to decide if the video game is appropriate for their child's age and emotion, and for their own desires for what they want for their children. So this resolution did pass in this last session. And so we're hoping that other states will do that. And we hope, Congressman, that you're able to also get it passed in Congress, so that we will send a clear, strong message to the industry that parents need to have help, that we want to do the right things, but we need to have help. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pulsifer. I think that's great, and we really appreciate your work as a parent. I say that both as a parent and a policymaker. And some of the apps do have ratings, and they just aren't rigorous enough. So I like that it's independent as well, because some of the apps that my kids use that say they're appropriate for ages 9 and up simply aren't. If you're, you can find a lot of junk out there online. So we appreciate the approach you've taken. Hope we can send that same message at the federal level. So now we're going to hear from our expert who works day in and day out to educate the public on the dangers our children face online, as well as some strategies to be involved and to minimize risk. So Michelle, tell us a little bit about what you do and take us from there.
So I work with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We're housed in the Utah Attorney General's office, and we work closely. You had mentioned the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We work very closely with them. That's where we get our cyber tips on a daily basis. And as you mentioned before, the influx of cyber tips has increased unbelievably in the last few weeks. We are drowning in them, to be honest, and that's just cyber tips. So the things that our kids are facing is, yeah, it's great that we're able to be online and be able to continue our education, but at the same time, like you said, predators know that they're going to take advantage of that. One place that they do is they go to apps, they go to chat rooms, and that's big. We talk about apps, Snapchat, huge with kids. Mr. Horsley, I'm sure, is very much aware of this as well, being with Granite School District. That's what the kids are using. It's not only images, pictures, it's messaging. Well, understand all of these apps, all of these chat rooms, gaming, the representative mentioned that as well. Gaming is huge. These kids are able to go into these online gaming chat rooms. Think of it this way, wherever our kids are, predators are, right? Well, there's more and more and more. So the few things we've got to think about is that. Remember, parents out there, there's also apps that hide apps. So when we talk about Snapchat, say a parent does not want their child to have Snapchat. Well, there's all these apps that'll hide it. So if a child has 2 calculators on their phone, be aware. They can hide Snapchat in there so it doesn't look like they have it. There's all kinds of vaults, and you can Google that, and you can go to the app store and look for things like that. Another thing, we've got to remind kids to think before they post. This goes along with cyberbullying, sexting, all of these things. Kids are posting images, and the problem is, our kids, do they have privacy settings? No. Why not? Well, popularity, status, likes. So when they have these open accounts, anybody can grab those images, anybody can grab those, whatever they're saying, whatever they're doing. And that is how predators get in there. And that's how predators start with sextortion. They'll start sextorting kids if they get any kind of images. They'll start conversations. A lot of times they'll meet them through a certain app and then they'll lead them to another one. So we've had where they've sent them to Kick so they can have more of a private conversation with them. So there's a lot of predators that do things like that so that they can have a private conversation, as well as a lot of times to be anonymous. Also reminding kids that we need to protect our online privacy. We don't want to post things like our names, our addresses, our phone numbers. And this is kind of shocking to people, but this is very, very common. Kids will take a picture of their schedules, high school, junior high, and post it all over online and have open accounts. So think about that. Oh, here, I think my PowerPoint's popping up. So think about that. Kids posting their entire schedule. Think about what's on a schedule of a high school student, a junior high student, everything. So if they have these open accounts, they're posting everything. Can we go down, like, I'm past this, maybe one more. There we go. No, friends with strangers. Kids more and more often are buying likes, are buying friends. There's ghost followers, they're buying followers because of the popularity, the status that they want to fill with these apps. Why is that dangerous? Well, we need to know who our kids are talking to online. You can be anybody, and people are. A lot of times they're able to groom them in a way that they're able to engage. That's how they become friends with strangers. But the thing is that they gain that trust that way. They may misrepresent who they are online, but as they go more and more and more, then they gain that trust. Okay, next. I talked about sexting. This is a big problem with our kids. Not only, I want to stress this, not only in junior high, high school, elementary level. We've had 10-year-olds sexting, sending inappropriate videos and images. So we've got to have conversations with our kids. Not only sexting and cyberbullying go hand in hand. And when we have these conversations with our kids, we've got to remember, not only are there, of course, legal consequences, because this is child pornography that they're exchanging, but there's consequences such as emotional consequences. There's consequences such as these images and videos getting into the hands of people we don't want them to get into the hands of. And with more and more and more kids being online, as parents are going back to work and as we're going into this summer, we've got to remember they're going to be on more and more. So having that conversation with them. Okay. Internet predators. We've talked a lot about this. Internet predators are everywhere. When I do these presentations, I don't do it to scare kids, to tell them never to go on the internet, but we need to be aware and we need to give them those tools that make them aware of what danger is out there. Internet predators are everywhere. So just today alone, from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I pulled 16 cyber tips just for Utah. Yesterday, for about 2 days, I pulled 40. What that is that's people reporting online, and outlets such as Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, they report on there as well. So anything they see that would be illegal activity with a juvenile, they will report it, as well as somebody can go on and report a cyber tip line report too. If their child is being harassed, I'll give that information at the end of this for a reporting option. Okay. I talked about grooming. So this is a big way we've got to talk to our kids about when we're talking about predators and we're talking about access to our children. Grooming is very, very common with predators. They know how to do it. They're very, very good at it. Discussing adult subjects, turning the child against their family and friends. They don't instantly share and ask for revealing images. They build up to that. They use flattery. They want to gain that trust. And we've seen that in a lot of cases where they actually get them to meet outside of the home, where they can, sexually abuse, sexually assault them, whatever it may be. We also see the increasing sextortion cases. So what happens is with sextortion cases is they'll get them to send them a picture, an explicit picture, and then they'll tell them things like, if you don't send me another one, you don't send me a video, I'm going to expose you to your friend, your family, I'm going to put it all over the internet. So these cases now, what's nice is we do have a sextortion statute here in Utah. These can be charged. These people can be charged. And they will go all over. And we've had cases here, we've had a few cases here where the sextortion statute has been used to charge. Okay. Online gaming, talked a little bit about that, but just remember this is a big one. Online gaming is a big one because there are a lot of children on online gaming. So kids, online gaming, predators, online gaming. They know that. They know that this is huge. They know that kids are like that. And I want you to remember something. A lot of people will think that it's just games, the games such as the ones the teenagers are playing. No, it's not. They're infiltrating games such as Roblox, Club Penguin. We're talking about preschool games. We're talking about kindergarten games. They're in there. They're able to infiltrate these. So understand, it's not just the older games. They're everywhere. If they're in their chat rooms. And oftentimes what happens in the chat rooms is they're able to access the camera. So they're able to see the child, see in the child's home, which is very, very dangerous. Okay. So I talked about reporting options. Here's some resources and reporting options. Number one is our local law enforcement agencies. So wherever the jurisdiction that you live in, as well as school resource officers are awesome. Great for kids because they're in the schools and they know exactly what to do with these kind of things. Utah Attorney General's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, that is our website, utahicac@agutah.gov, and our tip line. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is the cybertipline.com. It's great. You can go on it. There's a big red button that says make it cyber tip line report. So say you have somebody that is talking to your child online or they're trying to entice them, you can actually go online, report that, and then any other states that are involved, say that predator is outside of Utah, that will also go to that state that's involves ICAC task force. Digital responsibility, it does a lot of our school presentations, and they're a great resource in summer as well to go, and they have online training for parents, for educators, everybody. The Safe UT app, I want to push that. That is always available. And we want kids to know that it's going to be available all summer. It doesn't go away because you're not in school. Safe UT is awesome. Make sure they have that downloaded. And then the last one I want to mention, and Representative Pulser, this is a great one too. This is Common Sense Media. So they do a system where you can go on, you can look and see if like what level, what age group, it's some app or a movie or anything. It's all kinds of media, what level it's appropriate for. And they also talk about what parents should be aware of, if there are concerns. It's a pretty great resource for anybody. I think it's a great resource. I use it all the time and suggest it all the time. So digital responsibility is response-ability.net. Common Sense Media is commonsensemedia.org. That is all I have. I do want to leave you with one thing. The most important thing we have to remember is talking to our kids, communication. Make sure those lines of communication are open. We don't want them to fear coming to us that their phone's going to get taken away, their device. We want them to be able to have that trust in their parents or a trusted adult that they can come to, and they're not fearful of losing everything. Open lines of communication are huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I use Common Sense Media with 4 kids all the time for movies, but I didn't know they did it for apps also. But what a great, all of those are great resources. So thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Ben Horsley, as I mentioned, from the Granite School District. So Ben, why don't you go ahead and take us from there?
Sorry, I was muted there.
There we go.
My presentation there. I bet the sound's a little bit better. You know, a lot of the content I normally cover in my parent training. I do several of these a year through our local PTAs in Granite School District, and actually in Jordan at one point too. A lot of the content Michelle's covered, I'm not going to go over that again. I did have a handout that they were going to pop up that showed a couple of tips for parents in terms of types of apps that are out there. And they kind of break down into several different categories. She's already mentioned a few of these that are pretty critical. There's your dating apps. There's your messaging type apps. I want to throw out a hit on Kik. It's a very popular place for predators to come into contact with children. We did an investigation with Channel 5, and they created a fake Kik account of a 13-year-old girl and just put an image up of a innocent looking 13-year-old girl. Within 24 hours, they had over 62 requests from men asking for friendship on that app. And so it is not a friendly place. Again, sometimes our kids utilize messaging type apps simply by virtue of the fact they know that their parents are not monitoring those. And so a lot of times parents are using iMessage on an iPod or an iPhone, and they're able to see those messages come through. I know I do that with my own kids, but then they will go get another app that they know that their parents aren't monitoring. Similarly, they'll use the direct message function on our regular social media apps. So they'll get the Messenger app from Facebook, they'll direct message using Instagram, and parents don't know that their kids are having those conversations. So one really important tip that we really like to emphasize with social media, and you know what, I've gone through this with my own kids. I have a 17-year-old going into a senior year. I have a sophomore, and now an 11-year-old going into junior high here shortly. I've gone through all the phases of social media with them, and we have just chosen as a family that social media, until they can build up the trust, it's just not something we want to have in our home, because there's just so many, as Michelle's already demonstrated, ways for kids to get in trouble even when they're not looking for it. And so direct messaging through those social media channels is a great way for predators or for inappropriate conversations to happen. A lot of the sexting that we see in our schools is happening just via direct message on Instagram or Twitter. So funny story, a few years ago, one of our principals had this sexting case blow up. There was a case where these kids had created fake accounts and were posting inappropriate images of themselves and other people. They were posting those to this fake account. We were able to figure out pretty quickly who the account belonged to. And then through a warrant, they were able through the direct messaging, discover how these images were coming through. But in the midst of this, my principal calls me and says, Ben, we have to shut down the Twitter. We just need to shut it all down. Like I had some big switch in my office and I was just going to shut it down. And I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have that kind of power, and we cannot block some of these apps, even though we, as Representative Pulsifer mentioned, we have excellent iBoss filtering services that's constantly monitoring different aspects. That's on our own devices. And if a kid chooses to use our Wi-Fi at school, those things will be blocked. But all they have to do to access and get around those filters is turn off their data and use their own data. They turn off the Wi-Fi and use their own data. So I would remind parents that, as Michelle mentioned already, possession of child pornography, images of children that they share. I will tell you, there's a report or a study that came out about 6 months ago that indicated, I don't know about you, I'm in my 40s. I'm right up there with Representative McAdams. He's an old fogey. When I was in high school, one of the most intimate things you could do as part of a relationship was hold hands, right? That was like the big first step in a relationship. Well, now it's sharing an inappropriate image. It's sharing a nude image of yourself. That is considered less sensitive to kids than physical touch. And so oftentimes before they even go on a date, have a conversation in person, they're texting with each other and they will ask to send a nude photo of each other. And we get those kind of requests. It's considered sexual harassment. So we have a lot of those kind of investigations happening on our school property. And these kids, they don't think long-term about where these images go once they're out there on the World Wide Web. And so what happens is, for instance, last year we had a sophomore girl, she was dating a boy. They'd been dating for 3 months. And I know in high school, that is an eternity. And these kids thought they were going to be together forever. And they had been sharing inappropriate images with each other as their relationship grew. Well, what happens? Unfortunately, true love comes to an end. And in this particular case, she had shared over 50 images with this young man. And so instantaneously, as they got into a fight, he threatened to share these photos with other people. Now, fortunately, in this case, so she comes out to her mother, fortunately, in this case, and says, Mom, I need help. Mom calls the high school administrator. They get the school resource officer involved. They were able to go down and get this kid's phone before he had shared any images. That is one story out of dozens that I could share that don't end that well. And unfortunately, these kids share these images. They're out there forever. They're not thinking long-term that their employer down the road, their university, in offering a scholarship is going to do a simple Google search. And sometimes these images come up. There's even on Snapchat, there's websites that specialize in posting screenshot images from Snapchat. One of them is called snapchatted.com. And so kids think they're sharing these images via apps and they're never going anywhere. But once it's out there on the World Wide Web, you just got to assume that it's going to be exposed on the internet. And so we actually had a Division I student who's going to go play Division I football, offered a scholarship and had that scholarship revoked as a result of some of the content that was on his social media account. He ended up having to go to a D2 school and kind of work his way back in. That was several years ago. So you can imagine how much has changed just in that time. A couple other things. Kids will use spam accounts. So they know their parents are following them. Oh, let me go back to the direct message function. Parents, I want to encourage you to actually log in as your children on your device. I've got my phone here and I don't use Instagram. I could care less about sharing my photos that way, but I am logged into 2 accounts. One my son does not use anymore because he's lost that privilege. And my older son's account, I'm logged in as him. So I'm not following him. I know his password. I'm logged in as him, and that allows me to actually follow his messaging. And so when his friends converse back and forth, he has to remind them sometimes, hey, my dad has access to this, so watch your language, or make sure you're being appropriate. And he's so embarrassed, but and he asked, why, Dad, you have to do that? I said, oh, because I love you and I care about you and I want you to stay safe. And so it's not about privacy. It's about caring about our kids and making sure they do stay safe. So kids will create spam accounts. So they know their parents are watching their main Instagram or Twitter account. And so they call it something else, but it's the real account they're using that their friends follow. So they'll post regular stuff on this one they know mom and dad are following. And that's why you got to be logged in as them. So you got to make sure that they don't have some other account out there where they might be doing things that are not as appropriate. We've talked a little bit about cyberbullying. We see, especially in this day and age of the school dismissals, that these kids have a lot more time to themselves, and they're using some of these apps. They'll create anonymous accounts and start harassing people. And they can do that in a myriad of ways, from sharing photos of innocuous things that are happening. They'll take pictures of that individual and they're not paying attention. It's really important that when those accounts come up, that they're reported to Instagram and or to just get a hold of your school official. We're happy to help you with those kind of things. We've talked about sexting. I want to be really clear. In addition to the child pornography issue, possession of any pornography on school property is a crime in the state of Utah. So, you know, I used to do this thing. We have over 13,000 followers on our Granite School District Twitter account. And under Twitter etiquette or Twitterkit, when someone follows you, you follow them back. And so I used to follow back all these accounts of these students that would follow us. And one day I just happened to look at my feed, and literally 1 in 20 posts had something inappropriate and even downright pornography. So I stopped following those accounts, because possession of pornography, right? I'm on school property. Our kids, they don't think about those kind of things. So as Michelle mentioned, we really want to be open about the things that they're sharing. I don't think they're thinking about that being inappropriate. And so this is not a moral discussion. This is not about whether pornography is right or wrong. I'm telling you it's against the law, and your child could be prosecuted under that law. So we want to make sure that our kids understand, again, what they have on their phone. Again, she's mentioned cases. We've had kids as young as 8 years old with pornography on a device on school property, and that is in fact a crime. I would mention, just with respect to the fact that she mentioned on Instagram, we've had 2 separate instances as of late. We had an 8 and 10-year-old boy, and I just found out about this. This wasn't something we were directly involved in, but Unified Police were. They had created an Instagram account. Their parent had given them access, and they resided within our school district. They were getting groomed and sending inappropriate pictures of themselves to an adult male out of California. And what he had done, as Michelle had mentioned, he'd groomed them by sending them gift cards and presents. I just don't know. This man obviously committed a crime, but at the same time, there was negligence. I'm going to say it straight up. There was negligence on the part of the parent for allowing their child, an 8 and a 10-year-old kid, to have access to Instagram without any sort of supervision. So we want to make sure that if we're going to give our kids access to these tools, that we are providing. It is not the school's responsibility. It is your responsibility as a parent. And so if you don't have the ability to manage that, then I would seriously ask you to consider restricting the access to those types of devices and apps if you can't monitor it. And there's no harm or foul in that. I'll tell you right now, my 11-year-old son, he does just fine with an iPod with only 5 games on it. And if he wants another one, he knows he has to get rid of one he has, because I don't want him on that device all day long. So just a couple more quick things here. Make sure that your kids have set times where they give that device up. They should be putting that on your nightstand every night. There's no reason kids should have access to those devices all night long. There's this conversation going on in the state about start times for our high schools, and I'm not here to discuss that, but I will tell you, it's interesting to me that we see kids online doing inappropriate things, at all times of the night, at 11, 1 o'clock in the morning. I've had kids tweet at our account, and I look at it in the morning and I see that they did it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so how do we expect our kids to get a good night's sleep when they have access to these digital devices? So make sure there's some set times where they have a chance to take a break. And parents, I'm going to call us out because I'm a parent. We need to set a better example. When we get in the car, put away the devices, take out the earbuds, not right now because I'm using them, but take out the earbuds and have conversations with your kids. Our kids literally do not know how to have social interaction with each other. And that's why they're using these digital devices to go into these worlds that they shouldn't be involved in. They just don't know how to have those conversations. And it's because we're setting a poor example. There's a study out that came in December that indicated that toddlers' interactions with their parents, those very meaningful and important interactions, the cooing at your child, were down 50%. And we have these children that are growing and that are not getting that necessary social interaction with their child. That's necessary part of their social and emotional development, because what are the parents doing? They're on their device instead. So again, regularly review your kids' phones, have opportunity. If they're afraid to share it with you and you don't know their password, there's probably a problem. So make sure that you have that open conversation. And it's, I always tell my kids, hey, it's not you I don't trust, it's your friends. And obviously I'm just kidding, but at the same time, I just don't trust anybody else. I can trust you all day long, but I want to see what's going on with some of your friends and the other people that you're interacting with. And again, it's because I care and I love you. That's how our kids need to know and understand these things. This handout we have here, feel free to download it, screenshot it. If the congressman wants to post it to your website, you are free to do so. It is one of the most downloaded items on our website at graniteschools.org. You can also find it there under the title of the document. So again, if you don't know what an app does on your child's phone, they probably shouldn't have it. They should be able to explain that to you. Never give your kids free reign and access to the App Store. Have a conversation with them every time they want to download something to their phone, and make sure you're comfortable with that content. And when you have that kind of relationship with your children, you'll find that they're more willing to come to you when they get into trouble. That's all I got.
Thank you. Those are very helpful resources. So we're going to turn to the next phase of this conversation, of this webinar. So I want to remind those who are participating today that we are recording this webinar, and we're going to make this event available to the public so that you can share these presentations and this helpful information with anyone that you know who might find these resources helpful to them. So let's begin by taking some questions from the audience. And please remember that the topic of this webinar is keeping children safe online. If you have a question on another topic, please submit it to the moderator, and my staff or I can make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. So we have a couple of questions that have come in right now. I want to note one comment in the chat, and that is somebody asked about, as Michelle was talking about, them being able to access the cameras and see into your home and see your kids. Somebody pointed out that you can put even a piece of tape over the camera to obscure the camera, and then or a Post-it note, and then you can take it off if you need to use it, but put it back on so that it's not just accessed without your knowledge. I think that was a helpful tip. So the first question comes from one of our participants. It says, as a grandparent, I worry so much about this topic, and this info is helpful. The question is for Michelle. What do you feel is the right age to get a child a smartphone or iPad? Is there a recommended age for that?
I get this question all the time. And there's no recommended age. It's comfort levels. But I'll say this. I mean, I have a teenager. I have a 17-year-old, and she didn't have a phone until almost high school. And I walk into schools now, and I'm sure Mr. Horsley's aware of this. Kindergarten, they all have a room full of smartphones, which is unbelievable. So having those conversations is important whenever the parent decides they're comfortable to give those smartphones to them. But understand, you're handing them this high-powered computer and they're walking out the door. You can't keep an eye on them. It's not like it used to be where you could keep the computer in the main room, that you're handing them that to walk out the door. They have a lot of power. So that's why the communication is so important. And it is really important, as Mr. Worsley stated before, if we're going to hand them these devices, we need to know how they work. We need to know how they work. We need to know how to set limits. We need to know everything that's on there. So you've got to make sure that they're mature enough to handle all of that. And setting some limits, setting some passwords. I mean, a lot of the phones now, these smartphones, they are very smart, and they have a lot of ways you can lock them down.
Can I just add to that, Congressman?
Yeah, please do, Ben.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Michelle says. There's not a set age. I think it's the maturity of the individual. I know in my home that we started off with some other types of devices and then built up the trust and told them that literally had a physical contract and said, I will not do these things. I will do these things. If this happens, I'm going to come talk to you about it. And you're never going to get in trouble if I see something inappropriate. And we just kind of had those kind of conversations. But I will tell you, my older son was a little bit more, I got to make sure he's not listening, is a lot more mature than my second oldest son. And so he got a lot more privileges in terms of access to social media. And that's even pretty limited, even though he's 17 years old, than my 14, almost 15-year-old son. And that's not a knock on him. They're just different people with different maturity. And so you really got to make sure that you're comfortable, again, with the content that they could potentially come into and have access to, and that, you're monitoring that.
I think my only expertise is as a parent, and I think that is good advice, that every child's different, but it's not only the inappropriate content that's online, but social media on a young developing mind, even at its best, can warp some of that early childhood development and early teenage development. For a teenager who's seeking approval, to have an instant approve, disapprove button on everything they do can really not be helpful to their sense of self-confidence and development. So, I think some of my experience comes from lessons learned the hard way, but I think it is good to know your child and make sure that they're ready for it before you throw them into that. It's hard to go backwards once you've gone forward. So the next question is also for our panelists. If kids keep their accounts private, if it's an Instagram account or another account and they keep it private, are there risks with that, as long as they're not a public account?
Yeah, can I speak to that, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
So one of the reasons I have a lot of faith and trust in my older son is because when we first gave him access to Instagram, this was when he was coming into high school. We explained that there were some dangerous things out there, and he had a private account, and what somebody had done, a pornographer had come in and on their account made mention alphabetically of just random accounts. I don't know how they got the handles on those accounts. I don't know how that functions. But what happened is her inappropriate picture showed up on my son's feed because she had mentioned his handle in her post. And so he brings it to me. He's freaking out. He's like, Dad, I swear I didn't look this up. And I could see instantaneously what had happened. And my wife and I reported the account. And he's like, just get rid of it. I don't want to. I mean, here's a kid. He just didn't want to lose access. But there's no guarantees on that. And so I would point out, too, that kids are exposed, whether they intentionally or not, are exposed to pornography. It used to be 11 years old was the average age. Then it was 9. And now studies indicate that most children are exposed to some form of pornography by the time they're 8 years old. And so most of that is completely unintentional. It's a YouTube video or they click on something accidentally, or their friends show it to them, right? Again, our kids need to know, as Michelle mentioned, there has to be this open dialogue. When you see something inappropriate, you can always come talk to me. You're never going to be in trouble. I want to help you digest that. It's gonna make you feel kind of strange inside, and I want to help you work through those feelings since you've never seen those kind of things before.
I think that's right. Well said. And the content these days, the content will find the kids. They're not, many of them are not looking for it. The content will find them. I see a question in the chat asking if Congress knows of recommended software to set parental and safe limits on smart devices. I'm aware because I'm a parent of 4 young kids. I don't know if others in Congress are aware. Some members of Congress still use a flip phone, so certainly not everybody's aware, but I am aware of software. Part of my concern, and maybe I'll invite Representative Pulsipher to weigh in here too. I know there is software that you can set to keep apps at a certain rating inaccessible to the user of a profile of a smartphone. My concern is the app ratings I don't think are rigorous enough. You know, I think Instagram has a rating of 9 and up, and that, the way I use Instagram, it is appropriate for 9 and up, because I don't know many 9-year-olds that want to talk about political posts or anything, but the content that we'll find a 9-year-old, an 11-year-old on Instagram is shocking. What's out there and what will find our kids. And so my concern with some of the software that lets you set limits just based on the app rating is app developers, they want people to find their apps. They want to have, they make money based on how many people have downloaded the apps, how many people have accounts on the app. And I just don't think they're frankly setting limits that are rigorous enough for our young children. And so that's why I support Representative Pulsipher's resolution, and I'm carrying something similar in Congress, because I think there needs to be an independent body, independent from the app developers, that will set a rigorous standard for what is appropriate for some of these apps. Representative Pulsipher, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. You know, exactly what you said. People have done studies, and there's content out there on these apps that for somebody is just fine, as you mentioned, but for a child, they could find things that were just, you would not want your child, a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or maybe even a 15-year-old to find. And what the problem has been is these, the ratings were done by the software, by the apps, but they aren't consistent. So what one app might consider okay for a 9-year-old, another app might consider that, or a parent might consider that as inaccurate. And so what we were hoping for with this resolution is to have an independent body, so not the apps themselves, but an independent body that would look at it and set the apps. And that's really the same thing we have in the movie industry. We have an independent body that sets those. So they're transparent and they're consistent. And then you really know what you're talking about, because yeah, you can see some of these just terrible things for things that say they're okay for 12-year-olds or they're okay for 9-year-olds or whatever. So that was the intention, is to try to get an independent body to do it so it can be consistent and we can trust it.
And I just like so many of these apps. Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Yep, go ahead.
I would just point out that when I first started doing these presentations, I'm sure Michelle, because I had people ask me all the time, what products should we be using? I'm not here to endorse a product, but I will tell you that Apple and Android have stepped up their game in terms of parental tools. So if you go to screen time now on an Apple device, you can set all sorts of restrictions. My kids, for instance, do not have access to the internet on the phone. I block Safari. I just don't want them looking at the internet on their phone. If they want to go look at the internet, they need to do it in the computer in front of everybody. There are screen time restrictions, so their apps turn off at certain times, and that really bothers my 17-year-old son. And then I remind him that I love him and I care about him and I want him to be safe. So if you don't know how to use those things, Google it, right? You can Google just about any resource. If you don't know what an app does, if you're looking for other tools on how to do those screen time restrictions, there's lots of resources online, and you can learn how to use them, and they're pretty easy. So I applaud Apple and Android for stepping up the game and providing some of those tools for parents.
There's some great content in the chat. I'm not going to summarize it all, but some great content, great discussion there if people want to look at that too. I want to go to the next question that we have here from Maria. Maria says that having just finished up distance learning, I found that the teachers made good use of YouTube videos for teaching. Our struggle with our young, mostly internet inexperienced children came with them going down the rabbit hole of YouTube distraction, which we know, I can relate to that, which we know can come with its own unintended dangers. I watched my children like a hawk during distance learning. It was exhausting. What other methods are available to educators? What is Granite School District looking for in video platforms that will help parents come help parents come the fall, should distance learning continue in some format? Are there other things than just throwing them out into the open waters of YouTube and the internet?
That's a great question. Let me applaud the parent for making it through distance learning. That was a challenging time for everybody involved in the educational process. But that being said, I will tell you that we don't restrict use of YouTube, because there are a tremendous amount of resources out there, but we discourage teachers from pushing kids to that place for the very reasons you've indicated. And what we do prefer is that they download those videos and upload them onto their Canvas account or to their Google Classroom account to ensure that that content is being viewed in a safe place, and then you don't get that distraction that comes. That's really difficult because some of that content is protected, and so it might be a tremendous resource for your child, and they don't want to restrict that and not be able to use it simply by virtue of the fact that it's on YouTube. And we don't either. We don't want to micromanage that, because there is a lot of great content out there. But I will tell you, that is our philosophy and our approach, is to try to get download that content and put it in a safer place. I don't want to go into the weeds on that. I hope that answers the question.
Any comments from anyone else on that? Thank you, Ben. I think that's great. As a parent who came through barely distance learning, thanks to my wife, I would add.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you. I thought somebody had a good comment that said, you know, even the best software that can try to protect from some of this dangerous content on the internet isn't foolproof, and stuff can come through. You know, you can put up sites, you know, I've clicked on Apple that says block adult content, but it's not foolproof. There's so much information on the internet that it just gets through. And so one of the best things you can do is, I think it's important, and Ben mentioned this, I think all of our panelists mentioned this, but have that conversation with your kids. The best thing you can do is teach them to be smart consumers of content, to know what the risks are and how to avoid those risks, and help them to make smart decisions for themselves and not rely only upon the filters that you can place on that. So I think that's important, to sit down and have conversations with your kids about what's out there, what the dangers are that are out there, both immediate from predators, immediate dangers, but also just some of the why some of this content might be harmful for their own development and seem innocent, and you know, these are friends or whatever, but have the conversations with them about making decisions for themselves. And that's ultimately the best filter you can have, is one that is self-regulated, and teaching your kids to do that, and a great skill that they would have as adults. Another question is, what sort of counseling resources are available from the state? And I would invite all of you to respond to this, but what sort of counseling resources are available from the state to assist families from different access points, to help them build healthy relationships and transparent conversations from an early age, or to help families manage the complicated dynamics that exist if a problematic situation arises? So we talk about talking to your kids and helping them to develop good content consumption skills, and where do you learn as a parent how to have those conversations, what you should talk about, both prospectively and then in the moment when you either discover that they've been exposed or seeking out inappropriate content, or it has found them and they've come to talk to you about it. Are there any parental websites or resources that parents can see to guide us on how to have those conversations?
I was just going to mention that there's a lot of great classes that people can take through Salt Lake County Youth Services, and there's multitudes. But Salt Lake County Youth Services has some great ones that have to deal with substance abuse, mental illness, internet, family, how to parent. That's a great resource, Salt Lake County. Really great. Again, Safe UT app. Kids can call in, people can call in, they feel like something's going on, and those are 24 hours a day, online counseling services. So, and the nice thing about when I mentioned Salt Lake County, all free of charge. These are free services, no charge for those.
Somebody's asking a parent guide of sorts to summarize what you're seeing. Is that a Salt Lake County another place to do that? What risks should you be aware of, or what's out there? And somebody else asked, what are warning signs or behaviors of phone use that you should watch for in your kids? What are the red flags that are out there that a parent should be looking for? Is there a parent guide that we can go to see that information?
So the handout I provided is a great quick look resource. There's some videos on our YouTube channel as well at graniteschools.org on digital safety. Each school within the state of Utah should be providing digital citizenship trainings, and those come from Michelle's office. There's some other groups that provide those free of charge as well. So our school community councils should regularly be discussing how to educate the kids in the classroom, provide that digital training there, and become good digital citizens, and then also providing resources to parents on a regular basis as well. So those are tremendous resources. There was a second part of your question, and I totally just lost my train of thought. So
yeah, I don't
maybe I got it all. I don't know.
I think that's good. Yeah. Any other comments from our other panelists?
One thing is if they want to go online, I mentioned it before, but our partner that, as Ben mentioned, we go into the schools, is Digital Responsibility, and they have all of that training for parents as well online. So that's a great resource to go and Google and read and look at the different presentations online.
To speaking to that, and actually the previous question, there are lots of resources online in terms of parental help and resources, especially for kids who've been exposed or had some of these issues. So in addition to the programs that were already mentioned, Google it, you'll find it. I promise. There are a lot of resources, short video snippets on things, tips, and other things that we're discussing here that are more exhaustive parent guides, as it were.
Yeah, I was also going to mention that I know Jordan School District, for instance, and I'm sure Granite does too, has family resources, because someone mentioned in the question, how about learning how to talk to my child? And I know there are resources. There's a family center at Jordan, and I'm sure Granite, where if you go and ask, you can get some help there too.
Great. So the school districts do have resources. I know that Granite emails them out, as well as probably Jordan and other school districts will also email out those resources. Before we close, I also want to, Ben, there's a request that you start a parent email list with the issues you're seeing in the schools. So you may already do that, but you are popular. People want to, it's Ben Horsley with the Granite School District. He is very active within the Granite School District, and you can find him that way. But what you're doing, both your observations as a parent, I'm taking notes personally as a parent myself. It sounds like you've developed some good skills that we can learn from. So anyway, a plug right there. Let me just conclude our webinar today, being respectful of everyone's time. Thank you again to everyone for joining me and our community experts as we discuss ways that you can work to keep your kids safe online. So I've enjoyed this conversation. Again, I'm approaching it both as a member of Congress, but as a parent myself, and I've enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been enlightening. You can find the resources included in this presentation on my website, so they will be uploaded there. Just go to mcadams.house.gov. You can also contact my office directly, and any member of my staff would be happy to get them to you. Just call our office at 801-999-9801. And we can point you to those resources. Let me just say, in all seriousness as well, if you believe a child is a victim of abuse, be it online or other, please contact local law enforcement. They are well trained to be sensitive and care for the child and approach it in a delicate way, but to also protect our children. You can contact local law enforcement. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, of which Michelle belongs, also has a tip line at 801-281-1211. So thank you again, Representative Pulsifer, for your leadership, Ben Horsley with the Granite School District, Michelle with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force for joining us today. And let's be safe out there, and let's keep our kids safe. Thank you.